topic is a return to crafts, back to basics, a return to craftsmanship. I actually want to bring that phrase back as a question, a return, is there a return to craftsmanship, a little later on. But first, let me briefly introduce the wonderful panel. Liza Lou is an artist, an American artist who has for 30 years been creating handmade, labor-intensive, large sculpture and installation pieces made from beads. India Mahdavi is a Paris-based architect and designer who's known for her innovative, eclectic style and her commitment to artisanal furniture and design. And Mareva Grabowski-Mitsotakis is the co-founder of Zeus and Dion, a collection of high-quality clothes and products that are based on or draw from traditional crafts in Greece. Each of you has a very specific field and different relationship to craft. So I thought perhaps it would be interesting if if each of you could talk about that a little first in your different fields, art, design, fashion. And then we can come back to a sort of more general discussion. Liza, will you go first? Yes.
Okay. Yes, well, that's an interesting starting point to think about craft as an artist. I have been interested in craft as a poetic possibility, so more from a point of view of metaphor, thinking about how making connects us to our humanity, and has led me in my own work to think about, and it's interesting to follow up upon after NFTs and technology, sort of thinking about the sweat and blood and oil of the hands and the handmade and the touch and the feel and the smell and the sounds of making are what fascinate me most. So that's my short spiel on what I do.
I came across manufacturing with artisans and ateliers throughout France when I started my praxis 22 years ago in Paris, and the home industry wasn't what it is today. Very little was possible on the market, so I started, for my project, started manufacturing my own furniture. And it had to be sustainable, it had to be sort of easy. So I started designing and using the network of these fantastic makers available in France to start working with them. And I see it as a conversation, an exchange with their skills, their knowledge, and it's mostly traditional practices that I've been working with. And over the years, it became a model for me to actually sort of create this ecosystem in one street in Paris where I actually design, I have all these manufacturers, these craftsmen. It's a human adventure, I would say, also because it's an exchange of know-hows, me trying to push the boundaries of their making, and actually only making per order. So it's a very sort of sustainable model that I've been working with over the past 20 years. Recently, I've been also working with very specific collaborations that I've been doing with very specific manufacturers, trying to actually push them to new boundaries, also modernizing certain know-hows. And I really, I think it's not only, for me, it's the basis of my creation. I think it's what inspires me.
Well, I have a couple of hats, so I'm going to talk with the Zeus and Dion. I have a couple of hats, and so I'll talk about Zeus and Dion and my passion for craftsmanship. It started from Zeus and Dion, a lifestyle brand that basically showcases craftsmanship. It was during the downturn of the economy, during the crisis, and there were a couple of things that we wanted to do. The one was to basically showcase the work, the savoir-faire, the know-how of craft that had sort of eclipsed, whether it was the crisis, whether it was that there was not so much pride and dignity in the craftsmanship work. And I think that one of the important things was that there was the concept of sustainability that was arising, and we wanted something more authentic and sustainable, and that's how it transmitted to craftsmanship. I think that's how Zeus and Dion started. Then, we went to empowering women. We went into transmitting to next generation the craft. But the whole idea behind was basically to showcase the work and the savoir-faire of these artisans.
You mentioned women's work in what you've just said, and Liza too, when we were talking earlier, was speaking about a period in her life in which she spent quite a long period, 15 years, in my home country, actually, South Africa, where she worked with, formed a collective is not the right word, but sort of, how would you describe it? An art studio with a fairly large number of local women and who were already beaders, but worked with them and taught them her skills. And you talked about how you were about how female work was an important kind of theme for you. Could you speak a bit more about that?
Well, my first major work of art was a life-size kitchen made of beads. I made this work. It was first shown in the 90s at the New Museum, and it was a work that kind of staked its claim to sort of, I wanted to end the argument between art and craft. I wanted to say, what on earth difference can it make if art is art, what material, but at the time, certainly in the 90s, there was this sort of still this hierarchical thing. And so, and I also wanted to make a work that, I think I was thinking a lot about slowing down pop art. And also, because it's one at a time, I applied, it took me 5 years to make this kitchen, and by the time I finished, I basically became the person I was trying to describe, which was, became the ultimate hausfrau, right? Because one at a time. So I think that was really the starting point in terms of thinking about women's work being marginalized, seeing my own work being marginalized, and then extending that outward. About 15 years later, after having made many, many works, I began to think, can my work, what does it mean in a larger community to other women in other parts of the world? Could my practice make any kind of impact? And it led me to working in South Africa. I went to a nonprofit that sort of said, you should go to KwaZulu-Natal, because that was, unemployment was something like 70% in the townships. And so I went there and started an art studio there. And it was pretty transformative for me to think about what making meant to another group of women who we had really everything in common in terms of love and passion for a practice, and then yet our lives were so very different. And that was an extraordinary learning curve for me.
Mareva, you too spoke about empowering people, finding people and giving them the means and confidence perhaps to pursue the traditional skills that they had and perhaps pass them on. I'm wondering whether there's any sense for either of you, and perhaps for India too, when you're working with people who have used their skills in traditional ways, whether there's ever any worry about cultural appropriation, feeling that there's a sort of a patronizing element that comes in What has your experience been?
Well, it's interesting actually, because when craftsmanship is basically transmitting a know-how from either one generation to another or from one person to the other, and I did encounter not many, but in some cases, I did encounter people that artisans that didn't feel comfortable to transmit the knowledge, because you saw that in the periphery, because we worked with all around Greece, and in different areas, whether it was marble or wood or weaving or silk or metal work. And there was an actually interesting case in Crete where there was a person that was pretty old that was making bells for the bells that you see, that you have on cows. And each bell makes a different sound. So he was very old. That was like 10, 12 years ago. And we wanted to use these bells and do jewelry out of the bells. And we asked him how you made, how the sound was different from one bell to the other, and that we would pay him to teach certain people because he didn't have anybody, he didn't have a next generation. And he said, I'm never going to give. I don't want to teach anyone, and I'm never going to give the secret of how I do the sound of the bell. And I was actually shocked. I said, why? But it's so interesting, and you're giving knowledge. It's something that will move to a next generation. It's interesting that this is a craft that's very specific. And he refused. So I think in some cases, in a lot of cases where there were women, interestingly enough, whether it was weaving or embroidery or wood making, you saw that they were interested in getting to educate the younger generation. But some men were, it was sort of, it will live with me.
Possessive.
Yeah.
Yes. Her Excellency Sheikh Al-Mayasser said in a panel yesterday that learning skills for a younger generation is going to be more important than a university degree, which I thought was a fascinating idea. How do you all feel about this?
Well, I think it's a good question, because I feel it's a problem we have with education and university, and what the value is given to those manual skills versus intellectual skills. And I think that in a lot of countries we valued universities and intellectual programs much more than skills. And from my perspective, in my experience, a lot of the makers that I work with in France are facing the problem of finding the new generation to take over. And they have to move territories because they cannot find employees. They cannot find the younger generation. And so that's really a big issue. Although there's a lot of attention given now to craftsmen through many different foundations, like Homo Faber, like Betancourt, like the Luma Foundation. A lot of these, foundations are taking interest not only in new technologies but also in the making and trying. And the question of transmission is a very big issue, I feel.
I might add that there's no money in it. I mean, there's just simply no money in it. So working in South Africa with women, when I first started my project, it was 2005. So this is 11 years after the end of apartheid, and you have people who are just moving out of a rural environment into city life, into social life, and women who have been totally disenfranchised, totally forgotten women without any structure, without birth certificates in many cases. And so, yes, from their grandmothers, they had learned to use and do this craft, but for their daughters, my goal was to educate the daughters, you know, so that they would get their education and carry on. But do they want to sit and weave and bead? Well, not unless there's money in it. There was working with me because I could pay in a way that wasn't the normal thing that you might get. It was far above fair trade. I don't know that I think fair trade is fair. I don't think it is. I think it's very low. So when we talk about either or type of education and vocational training, well, I think that you have to have humanities, otherwise you never have an original idea. You'll just have worker bees without, you know, something to draw upon that makes an innovator, that makes a business leader. And so for that, you know, part of my project, we offered scholarships. And many of the women chose to do vocational training. One woman went and got her business degree from the university, which was thrilling. It meant she had to go all the way from the beginning and get a high school diploma, and worked her way through. But that's thrilling because with a business degree, now she has all of her craft and all of her skill, and now she can...
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's also, I think some of these craftsmen and artisans are very isolated. Isolated in the territory, but also they don't have the knowledge how to communicate and how to use the new technology to actually connect with the world. And yeah, that's a big issue, and the young generation doesn't want to necessarily go in these outside of the bigger cities to be able to take over these manufacturers.
So, is it true that there's a return to craftsmanship? Is this something? Is it a trend because we are feeling we're in reaction to consumerism, to mass production, or is it a luxury?
Oh, well, it's probably both. I think it is a luxury, but I feel that when I started out designing, design was about putting a form on a function. And I think that today, especially after COVID, where we pay much more attention to what's invisible. So it's about also who's making the object, what is it serving, what is the purpose, what is its lifespan, how is it, and you know, when I buy an object, I like to know where it's made, who it's made by, which hand, and I think that we have the consciousness of looking at all these items that all these elements that we're not used to, and I think that I just got back from Milan, and I see from the furniture fair, and I see a lot of very young and independent makers that are using their own. They have their own economy, making themselves, promoting themselves, selling themselves, instead of going through the mass market. So yes, I do think it's a trend.
I actually think there is a desire, a tremendous desire for authenticity. And that you have seen, especially, even before COVID, but I think that with COVID you saw it more. And what India mentioned is so right. It's not only about the product. The product is important, but it's as important how it is made, where it is made, which hands made it. And people, I think, there's a trend moving away from this consumerism that doesn't have an authenticity in it. And there's a desire going back into seeing how things are made. And I think that although, I have an issue with the internet because when you have kids, you start realizing. But on the other hand, the internet has allowed these people, these artisans, to show their work. Not only to show what they're doing, but how they are doing it. The amount of time that it takes for the table that India has designed to be made, and why also it costs the amount that it costs. Because that's also an issue about craft.
Well, that's what I wanted to come to, that, there's no getting around the fact that all these things we're talking about, whether it be artisanal, traditional forms of embroidery on beautiful hand-spun silk that is sourced in different parts of Greece, or handmade furniture, or painstaking works that take years of literally hand application, bead by bead. These things are expensive because they take time. And so, is it real to think that yes, people want authenticity, but are they prepared to pay for it, I suppose, is the question. I mean, there's a small luxury goods market where, yes, the clothes, Zeus and Dion makes beautiful, beautiful stuff, but it is expensive. India, I'm sure your furniture.
Yes, of course, it's more expensive than if I did mass market, but I feel that it's a human adventure that we're doing, and that we're keeping these traditions alive, these practices alive, and I think that you can do things in a very different scales. That's why I started, my furniture, because they're big pieces, are quite expensive. But then I started also a line of smaller objects where I use craft from all around the world. And yes, if I had to make those pieces in France, I wouldn't be able to sell them. But I tried to find the best lacquer maker from Vietnam. I found the crochet from India. I make chairs in Ghana, and basketry in Mexico, and they're all from makers. And I try to, it's really taking them further and trying to help them design objects that can be desirable and colorful, and they could sell. So it's really helping the market that way, I think.
Do either of you, and I'm sorry, Liza, to exclude you from because it's the question, because it's a sort of commercial one. Do you see changes in buying patterns and in interest from, let's say, shops who are ordering clothes, or hoteliers who are asking you to commission? Are people more interested in the handmade, in the artisanal, in craft? Are they prepared to pay for it?
I see that there is a big change, because I think from all the stories that people hear about, clothes that are made out of, made in some places like Bangladesh for kids, the conditions around the production. I think people are more conscious of, how something is made. And who has touched it? Who has? What hands have been on this product? And they'd rather buy, instead of buying 10 pieces that are that are not very good quality and that have a background that you don't want to really even know. I think that they'd rather get one piece that they could keep, that means a lot to them, and that has there's a certain value in it. I think there is a change that we see. Whether it's the homeware or the clothes, or in every aspect. I don't know if in India's designs she sees this.
Well, I think that. I think it's a balance that you have to find between how the things are made, where they come from, and the price that you want to sell things. And really, everything is available on the market, from very expensive and very high-end luxury, and all the luxury houses, the fashion people are selling very high-end. But I think you can always work things out, and I think that if you offer, I think what you're offering is a narrative, and you're offering, small production, so it's not all over the market, and I think that is something that's very valuable.
I think also there is one more thing, that people like to buy more things that have a story behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's an experience, there's a storytelling. So if you get to show videos on how something is made, and you get to find out about the people behind the product, and what type of family they have, in terms of how they worked with their dad or with their uncle. I mean, all this story has becoming more appealing, and it's about that experience also.
Yeah, and it's about creating a community also, I think, with the makers. And often, in France, for instance, when you have the Manufacture de Cogolin, with whom I've been making carpets, it's a whole little city that turns around the manufacture. The same with the Émaux de Longwy in the eastern part of France. It's a whole community that lives off that. So it's a viable economy in that sense.
I'm going to ask if anyone has questions in a second, but Liza mentioned earlier when we were talking that she is done with beading. and I'm really curious, I didn't ask the question over lunch, but is your upcoming work, and I know you have an exhibition next year in Paris at today's ROPAC, does the new work, and don't give anything away if you don't want to, also have craft, handmade, labor-intensive elements?
Yes, it has labor-intensive elements, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm sort of interested in the marathon of the human hand, and the miles that you can travel with the hand. And it's been an amazing gift to work with many hands over many years, from my studio in Los Angeles to working in relationship and living and working in community with other hands. But my new work is my own hands, just my own hands, and that's a really I'm through with beads, done with that. 30 years and I'm done. Did that, done and dusted.
Lisa, you were saying earlier on that you left your beads to the women.
Yes, part of the project was really I went there really to see what can happen as an artist, because I think it's very different not having a bottom line. You just have an idea, and it means that you don't have to worry. I mean, look, I'm not a rich man, I'm not a rich woman either, but I'm an artist, and I'm lucky because I have solvency as an artist. My work I've established that, and I make a living as an artist. But beyond that, I only really care about making the art. I don't think, oh my God, is this going to sell? I never think like that. I think this is the thing, and it's going to take everything I have. And ever since making The Kitchen, my first work, which I financed by waitressing and selling prom dresses, and then that sold, and then I made the next work, and then made the next. So I've always kind of done that, and did that also in South Africa, where every time we made a work of art, I didn't know if it would sell or not. Many times things didn't sell, and then they're in my storage. But in the end, after 15 years working there, I always thought, when I finished with my beads, because you can't imagine the amount of beads I have, okay? Mm-hmm. It's like it's a thing. It's a storehouse. And I thought, okay, once, like a fairy tale, when I finish with all these beads, then I can go home. And in the end, I said, no, it's for you. You keep them. And so that was the kind of the epiphany.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because then they can continue working in their own way.
Yes, they started their own collective. It's called Ntombiziwa Yewuzena, which means ladies helping each other. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that is a very nice note on which to stop and ask if anyone has any questions.
In the visual arts, there's a huge explosive comeback of craftsmanship in the form of zines and mainly woodcut and linocut printmaking. And it's not exactly livre d'artiste, but it's more like a small scale still, and a side hustle. It proliferates extremely well on Instagram. I mean, if you Google the hashtag linocut or woodprint, woodblock, you're gonna find extremely good works. But they're all still. Let's say a young woman is making tattoos in a studio, and as a side hustle, she does the printmaking. What would you, especially Miss Mareva Grabowski-Mitsotakis, would advise that young woman? How can she, let's say, make that side hustle into an actual viable business? What could she do? How could she do it?
I think what is very important, as I was saying, that's why I mentioned the internet. I think the state plays a role, and I think in the, is the minister somewhere? Yeah, he's here. So the Deputy Minister of Culture is creating with the Craftsmanship Council a platform where everybody can show their work in craftsmanship. They're going to be evaluated, and they're going to be, that will be a way to be able to present their work. I think it's very important to have the state backing. I mean, and we saw a lot of these panels where we discussed about what the state means, even from the museums before, the director in London. It is very important. We saw how important it is, especially during the pandemic. You need a vehicle. The vehicle, most of the times, is very difficult to be a private vehicle. It has to be a state vehicle. And I think that what they've been doing at the Ministry of Culture, creating this platform that is where they're right now they're writing down whoever comes, and they go by themselves all around Greece, and they check on each artisan. I think is the right way to go, because I'm not sure that the Instagram platform is enough to do so. I mean, I would love to see it be the way to flourish, but I don't think that's going to be enough.
I think you're absolutely right, and I would like to bring to your attention the foundation Michelangelo started this application called Homo Faber, and basically they have been surveying all the best makers, artisans, craftsmanship, know-hows throughout Europe. And so actually if you open that application, you can, if you type in Greece, you can actually find a lot of the very good makers or the potters or the ceramists, and it might be worth for your friend to try to contact them and see if she can be part of this, because I think that's exactly what she should be doing, is being on a platform.
In Venice, they had a fantastic exhibition, Homo Faber, the Michelangelo Foundation. It was really impressive, and there were a couple of Greek artists that were there, especially in the ceramics and art. But maybe the Deputy Minister, Mr. Yatromanolakis, can say a word about what he's doing with craftsmanship? Maybe? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's fine. He actually had raised his hand. I've been waiting to ask him.
Actually, I raised my hand because, I mean, we are designing a strategy, but I had questions for you to help us with our strategy. So, but just very quickly to tell you what we're trying to do. First of all, is a strategy to reestablish and reposition also craft in Greece. I say reposition because sometimes we have this misconception that craft is about, you know, what our grandparents did, and it's something that is out of date, and it's something that is not relevant. So it's not just doing, you know, reviving it, it's just also making it relevant. So what we're doing is skill building in terms of having for the first time certified degrees, not university degrees, but some kind of a, you know, a certificate that you have certain skills. The other thing is, so we are starting schools around Greece. The other thing is, as Ms. Grabowski-Mitsotakis mentioned, we are creating a platform. The platform, an online platform, this would be both to showcase stories of Greek craftsmanship, but also to kind of connect people to each other. And I'll get back to that because I have a question for you. And also to almost even register people. The third one is we're giving incentives, financial incentives to people. One would be tax reliefs, and the other one is actually a call so that people can buy equipment and things they need in order to, you know, support their business. And the fourth one is partnering craftspeople with design people. Again, it goes back to the relevancy question, so that the things that are made, because we're looking at also so that this creates jobs and, you know, helps local economies, that these are things that are actually marketable. So my two questions are, when we started doing this, one thing that became super obvious was that craftsmanship and craft is not a moment, it's actually a chain. And it starts from sourcing materials, and it goes to, you know, how you treat these materials, and then it goes to the actual, you know, craft, and then it goes to the market part. So my first question is, how important is sourcing of materials to you, and as part of the story, but also as part of the object? And my second question is, do you see a model of a craft person as being, let's say, the middle person of this chain, or do you think we're going to a model of a craftsperson / entrepreneur?
Well, the latter question, I think everything is possible. It all depends of the quality of the design also, and I think really the best combination is when a designer works with a craftsman, because I think they feed each other, and it's an exchange of knowledge. So I think that's the most interesting, and I think when a craftsman is very talented, then often he becomes an artist himself, or he becomes you know, a maker, a ceramist, or but if it's a very specific craft, I think it's really interesting to have that conversation, that dialogue. And then I think the territory is very important, and if you can work with local materials, and I must say that if it with my furniture or even with my interior design projects, as much as possible, I try to source local materials and local craftsmen and local makers, and I think that in that sense, I think what Luma Foundation is doing in Arles is very interesting. With this Atelier Luma, they've really surveyed all the local resources that the territory provides, and from then on they have invited our designers and residents and working with new technology to actually work on new materials, and I think it's really very interesting. So many things are possible. I don't think there's any rule, but working from your resources is I think a very good start.
Thank you, Minister Yatromanolakis. We are slightly out of time, but last word to Her Excellency.
If this is on. I didn't mean to say, or I know what I said yesterday might have meant that vocational school or apprenticeship may replace universities. I didn't mean it in that way. Universities are as important as vocational schools. And as you know, Qatar has invested a lot in universities, whether domestic or international. What I meant to say was that the UN studies that we're looking at today are saying 10% of the GDP will be dependent on the creative economy. Now, if you're a super talented craftsman or able to, in our traditions, whether you want to be a weaver, a boat maker, you name it, jewelry maker, there's no system right now. And I'm very happy to hear about the Greek ministries work because we'd love to learn from them. There's no system where the people who are doing intangible culture, where they can be transformed into an industry that's sustainable, but it's quality and authentic. And that's what we are working towards, and that's our goal. So the creative economy for us is matching the talent with the industry, irrespective of whether you have a university degree or not. That's, to me, not important. What's important is that you're passionate and skilled, and we're here to match people. So I just want to clarify, university degrees are still very, very valid.
Thank you.
I would like just to say one more thing. Last time I was here in Athens, I was walking around the city, and I was very inspired by all the makers that are in town and the richness of, and this is what makes the richness of a country, of a city, and it's so important. It was really very inspiring. So I think it's Paris has lost a lot of their makers, and they've all gone elsewhere out of the city because the city is too expensive. And I think that I think you should try to do everything to keep it as it is, keep that richness.
And we're back to the Athens effect, which we started with this morning. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the panel.